Denny said this. The wins are awesome, but I'm worried it might give Dems the idea that they can just sit on their hands and not work for votes in 2018. So this is, I was on with Michael Brooks just before this show tonight. I was on the Michael Brooks show, and we were talking about having to do two things at one time. Having to leverage the Democratic Party because they're quite literally the only national organization large enough to stop the onslaught from the Republican Party. Like, I mean, just pause for a minute and look at everything Donald Trump tried to do. And just imagine if they were efficient and not feckless enough to fail at everything that they're trying to do. Just imagine that. And then imagine how far that will put us back on a progressive agenda for the next 30 years. Easily. 30 years. And if you think about that, then how could you not see the urgency of working, even if sometimes you have to work with corporate Democrats just to stop this? Oh, listen, sometimes you have to, it's a common strategy. You have to hold the line. No, we don't like Ralph Northam, to be quite honest with you, but God damn it, can we not get Ed Gillespie? But what Danny was talking about is true, because while we are fine and we will agree to hold the line, that doesn't mean we're not giving these Democrats and these corporate Democrats the side eye, that we're not looking at the establishment and bringing a constant critique to the establishment and demanding that they move to the left, demanding that they embrace Medicare for all, demanding that they embrace 15-hour minimum wage federally across the board, right? Make sure that we actually get some progressive agendas and demand that we get money out of politics. We have to do both, and we're going to have to hold the line to make sure that we never give America back over to the rabid vision that the Republican Party and conservatives have. And simultaneously, never take our eye off the ball that journalists that many of us read and listened to and watched over the last 16 years lied to us to our face over the weekend in order to protect the Democratic establishment and to protect Hillary Clinton from the critique of Donna Brazile. Ain't nobody forgot that. We're not forgetting that. Matter of fact, it might be the B side of tonight's conversation. If it's not the B side of tonight's conversation, it'll be the conversation tomorrow. So we have to do both, and we must always hold these people accountable that are accepting our votes, make sure that they work for our votes, make sure that they earn our votes. And even better than that, let me tell you something even better than that. Shout out to all the Democratic socialists who won tonight, because you know the best way to hold the Democratic Party accountable is to have them afraid that they might lose you. So we got to do all those three things, man. One, we got to hold the line. There is such thing as a greater evil. There is. That is the biggest lie that's been pandered to us by people who are trying to, finagle their way in to get our vote. But yeah, you know what? If you do not have the ability to stop what the conservative movement is trying to do in America, what the Koch brothers want to do in America, and you want to equate what the Democrats, as shitty as they are, you want to equate that to people who literally cut benefits to children and the disabled. Let me slow down so that I could express to you exactly how much of a greater evil they are. CHIP, insurance program for children, of children who are poor, funding has lapsed. They're not going to renew the funding. 9 million children going to lose coverage. 9 million children. That's just the beginning. I believe $150 million that they're getting ready to hit the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. They're going to hit that, affecting about, my numbers might be off on this, but if I remember correctly, about 23 million Americans, including children, including the disabled, including the elderly. CHIP was fecklessness and their inability they were focused more on healthcare than renewing CHIP, right? That was just incompetence. But the cuts to SNAP, that's intentional, because they have to find a way to bring the budget deficit, down underneath 1.5 trillion so that they can keep getting, so they could pass tax breaks for their corporate donors. So their 1%, they have to keep it underneath $1.5 trillion of a deficit, or else they can't pass it through reconciliation, which means they're going to have a supermajority versus just 51 people with Mike Pence. And so to do that, where do they cut? SNAP, one of the places. Where else are they cutting? Medicare, Medicaid, all to give tax breaks. And we found out yesterday, if you don't believe that there's a such thing as a greater evil, we found out yesterday, this is probably going to hit most people in my audience because I have a pretty decent idea of who listens to me, right? If you make between $20,000 a year and $40,000 a year, the House Ways and Means Committee just exposed on yesterday that you will see your taxes increase. 38 million Americans will have their taxes increase. The people who make between $20,000 a year and $40,000 a year. In 2023, that's just 5 years from now, your taxes will go up, and they're going up. Why? So that they can cut taxes for the Koch brothers, so that they can cut taxes for Donald Trump. So anybody who comes to me and says that there's no such thing as a greater evil in this conversation, I would kindly tell them to fuck off, because you don't know what the hell you're saying. You are playing to something that is a tweetable moment. I get it. It's a good soundbite. It's something that you want to that you can use to try to bring support to yourself. I get it. It's a decent strategy when you're trying to bust up the duopoly. I agree, it's a duopoly, right? But you're trying to bust them up. You're going to say, well, both of them are the same. Both of them are the same, and you should just come over here and vote for me. Because why? Don't subscribe to the lesser evil. Go for the greater good. Right? I get it. It's a great strategy. But meanwhile, you're empowering the greater evil that's willing to take food, literal food out of the mouths of children in order to give money back to billionaires. I'm sorry. The verdict is in. Donald Trump and the Republican Party and the conservative agenda and the Koch brothers are the greater evil. The Democratic Party, they do not represent change in a positive direction, but they represent holding the line. They represent the status quo. It's the same goddamn shit I said. Same shit I said 2 years ago. I said if the choice came down between Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, and Jeb Bush at the time, because Jeb Bush was still in the equation, Jeb Bush represents a change to the right. Jeb Bush would have gone for some of these same exact policies. Maybe not the Muslim ban. But the tax breaks, Jeb Bush would have gone for the same thing. This is why it drives me crazy when people talk about, oh, we have to embrace the Bush family. Hell no, we don't. The hell you're talking about? They would have done 9 out of 10 of the same things. Just cut off the immigration policy. The Muslim ban. So Jeb Bush at the time, when I originally made this analysis, represented a hard shift to the right because conservatives wanted to swing the pendulum back rightward from Barack Obama. But Barack Obama and the Democratic Party represent centrism. Yes, that hasn't changed. They represent the status quo. Yes, that hasn't changed. And the status quo in America right now is center right, to the right of the center of the ideological spectrum. And so if the Republican Party was going to come into power and they wanted to differentiate themselves from the Democrats who happen to be center right, then they were going to have to go so far to the right that it was absurd for us to not recognize how detrimental that would be to America. And then the third part of that analysis was what Bernie Sanders represented was a shift to the left. And by left, I mean just left of center of the global political ideological spectrum. Bernie Sanders is not a socialist on the international stage. He's basically he's not even as far left as the Labour Party in the UK. But I said all that to say this, man. Look at the actual policies. Look at the actual policies that Donald Trump is trying to accomplish. And the only reason they're not accomplishing them is because they're incompetent. And and actually, let me be a little more nuanced, because it's not just gross incompetence. It's the fact that they have to go so far right to differentiate themselves from Democrats who are status quo, center right. Obamacare, center-right, conservative piece of legislation, thought up by the Heritage Foundation, first tested in Massachusetts by Mitt Romney, a Republican. And so for them to differentiate themselves, they had to go further to the right, so far to the right that it just doesn't even make sense. So far to the right that exposed the fact that, Republicans have been outflanked to the right by the Democrats. But this does not add up to say, oh, well, because the Democrats are center-right, they're just the same as Republicans. No, they're not the same as Republicans, Because in the midst of all the stuff that the Democrats have done, all the things, all the droning, and everything that the Democrats have done, have you seen them take literal dollars and food out of the mouths of children, the disabled, and the elderly in order to give tax breaks to the billionaires? So y'all miss me with the no such thing as a greater evil conversation.